Hello, everyone. So
Hey,
it
what's going on, y'all?
looks like quite a few people are here. So it's nice to see everyone join in. So first off, let's have you, Mario, introduce yourself, if you don't mind. Just tell a little bit about your channel and a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure. My name's Mario Dones. I have a fragrance channel, of course, that covers fragrances. I started around January. I am in Atlanta. I'm Atlanta based. I am someone who definitely wore a good amount of fragrances growing up and then took a huge break and then got into it right around the time that the pandemic hit. And then started my YouTube channel, I guess, months and months later. But yeah, I'm really excited to be here. Thank you, Eve, for having me. This is something that I've kind of been wanting to talk about, and I know that you hint towards quite often in your content. So I am excited to talk about it together.
Yeah, and I appreciate you bringing up this topic and being willing to collaborate on this. Yeah, so for those who are joining in from Mario's channel who have not seen me, I'm Eve, and I also have a channel, very similar content. We just review fragrances. I got into fragrances fairly late, I would say. I'm not one who grew up a lot with different fragrances. My family is just not into that. But around the time I think graduated college, that's when I started to really get into it. So yeah.
Okay.
And I guess this is what people always do on lives, but if you could list your scent of the day in the chat, feel free to do so. Are you wearing anything right now?
I wore Scotch Porter Badlands today, and I got
Nice.
inside roughly before we got set up. So yeah, this is still what I'm going with for today. It's nice though.
Awesome.
What about you? What are
Cool.
you wearing?
I am wearing Precise Taste and Do. I just wore that a couple of days ago, but I felt like wearing it again. So yeah.
I'm
All
all for
right.
that.
Let's see who's in here. Um, wonder if I could. Okay. Yeah, quite a lot of people here. Rudy, Joe, Heather, Wendy from Malaysia.
Okay.
Um, wow, we have Tara, Emily, just people from all over. So yeah, thanks for joining. All right.
Thanks a lot,
So I
y'all.
guess
Really appreciate it.
yeah, it's been a while since I did a live, so I might mess up something here, but bear with me. So I guess we could start off just talking about one of the topics that you and I were chatting about. Um, so I think maybe an overarching theme that we have is looking at why European perfumery, in particular French perfumery, is often seen and considered to be more superior compared to other fragrances from other countries. Um, I know there's a lot to unpack there, but do you have any initial thoughts that you have on that particular topic?
Yeah, definitely. So I guess kind of getting back to what I said opening up, like I did grow up wearing fragrances, quite a few. I usually had, at least three or four in the rotation. I mean, which isn't a lot compared to, somebody who reviews fragrances or collects fragrances. But for, a 12-year-old kid,
Yeah.
um, I would say I had a pretty good selection. But with the way that I grew up, the places that I was buying fragrances, this is consistently TJ Maxx, Marshalls, Value City, and that's pretty much it. TJ Maxx, Marshalls, Value City, and they're carrying the same fragrances now that they were carrying then. So it's a lot of Calvin Klein,
Mm-hmm.
Liz Claiborne, Tommy Hilfiger. So these aren't necessarily European based brands. These are American brands, and this is what I'm looking at as regular fragrances because this is what everybody's wearing. Everybody I know has Curve or, CK1 or my mom probably had every Liz Claiborne and Elizabeth Arden fragrance you could get at TJ Maxx. So to me, that's kind of what I grew up with as normal. But then later in life, as I got more into fragrances, I was seeing, man, like everything is in French. It doesn't matter who made the fragrance. It doesn't matter
Yeah.
if it's a French-based house, an American-based house, an English-based house. Everything is in French, and I felt so distant. And I remember kind of trying to figure out, well, hey, bro, you grew up wearing fragrances. When did you stop? And I think it really kind of started once I got to the point where I was grown and you really kind of had to advertise to me to get my money or to get my attention. You know, most of us are broke in college. We're not really buying any extras. So after
Hmm.
that point, it was kind of like, well, now I'm back out in the world. I'm spending my money where my attention is drawn, and my attention wasn't trying to be captured. You know what I mean? I don't really
Yeah.
feel like I was being advertised to, excuse me, much at all. And I quickly noticed once I got back into things just how things were, and it was just weird to me because I didn't really know much of the history of it in terms of
Yeah.
the industry.
When you say that you didn't feel like it wasn't being advertised to you, do you mean like you felt like the brands, maybe their target audience was like a certain demographic or a certain group of people?
Um, I wasn't putting that much thought to it then, but I just knew that it wasn't hitting me. You know, I thought about, well, what type of fragrances did you like growing up? What do you think you would be interested in now? And I'm like, oh yeah, I probably like, and I was wrong, but I probably like, you know, fragrances that are real sporty, you know, something that's nice and sporty and would catch my attention, easy to wear, you know, fits my athleisure gear I'm in every
Yeah.
day. And then I start thinking about, well, there are, you know, advertisements for that and commercials for that, but it's usually like a guy playing water polo or,
Yeah. It's so
you
true.
know, some shit I don't play.
Yeah.
And just doesn't, I think it just kind of missed the mark, not saying, you know, that I in particular needed to be advertised to.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
but I know at no point in time, whether it be a sales associate or advertising campaign, was I being pulled into that world.
I see. I see. Yeah. You bring up a lot of good points. I thought something you said that was interesting was how different brands, regardless of whether or not they're French, often put French labels on their fragrances or they call it something French. And that is something I've noticed, not necessarily just in perfumes, but definitely if you look at the wider scope of luxury goods,
Hmm.
I see that often too. And it makes sense, right? Because a lot of these brands are coming from, or a lot of these fragrances are coming from designer houses that create luxury goods.
Right. Yeah, it makes sense, but at the same time, it makes me cringe a little bit every
Yeah, for
time
sure.
I see it. You know, especially like when I see a black-owned fragrance brand, and it's like, what, or you know, the name of the fragrance. I'm like, why is it this? And that's not to say
Mm,
there aren't, you know, places where black people speak French. There definitely are. I grew up in the
yeah,
South. You know, I this isn't one of them.
yeah,
um, so yeah, it just always throws me off. I feel like with any type of brand, regardless of what you're doing, it's always appealing to be yourself. You
yeah,
know.
that's
Uh,
true.
but what about you? Like when you started getting, you know, after college and you started getting into fragrances, and how did you approach it? Did you just kind of go to the fragrance counter and pick things out, or
Yeah.
you
So I
being drawn in by
definitely,
anything in particular?
yeah, I mean, being a broke student, I definitely went to like discounter places. My place was TJ Maxx. I think that's where I got some of my first fragrances. I remember I got Burberry to be the Beat from TJ Maxx,
Okay.
which I mean that's a UK brand. So I didn't just get into like American brands. I would say I think most of the early ones I've tried out happen to be French brands.
Okay.
Um, and I think there is something to, this is probably something I wasn't cognizant of or conscious of, but I think there was something about like, oh, it's a French brand, it must be good. You know, so I don't know if that's what kind of influenced me to go towards that direction. But also that was what was being sold, at least where I was living.
Oh
So
yeah, I mean, and still, I mean, you still see Burberry in there, and you'll see
yeah,
other European brands in there as well. I just know I was buying, you know, Curve and CK1 and CKB and all that. Um, okay, I know we had a few other topics, and I know that the chat has been
yeah, I want
going. I
to
haven't really
make
had a chance to look
sure.
at it.
Let's see. I think I could highlight the certain comments. Let's see. So, yeah, anyone in the chat, you could feel free to share your thoughts on this too. it's not going to be just Mario and I just chatting with each other. We would definitely want to engage with you all.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know Eve says she hasn't done a live in a long time. This is actually my first live period. So bear with us as we catch up to the conversation. Um, so there's one thing in particular that I kind of wanted to talk about, and it's random. It's not like a full topic, but I have some of the notes that, the topics that we previously discussed mentioning. But I remember I was listening to a podcast, and I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's the perfumer behind Jasmine Saray, the brand.
Oh, is it the one associated with the Institute of Art and Olfaction? Because I know
she's done an interview with them, but she has her own podcast. But
Oh,
she's
she has
only
her
done
own.
like 3 or 4 episodes.
Okay, I need to subscribe to that. I would be very interested to hear what she has to say because I do follow her on Instagram.
I can't remember her name, and I wish I did. If anyone in the chat knows,
oh, Dana.
Okay, yeah, awesome. Yeah. Yep, I see it. Dana El Masri. Yep. So Dana was having an interview with another perfumer that she trained with in grass, that she went to perfumery school with, and they're having this conversation that's kind of around what we're talking about, right? And one thing that really stuck out to me from that conversation, they were talking about how they had to build fragrances as a project within school, and they had to pick a note to center it around. And she picked beeswax. Now, I grew up smelling beeswax all the time, regular hair care, skincare product, very American fragrance, right?
Yeah.
And as they're telling this story, they're recapping how all of their teachers were so surprised that they chose beeswax, and how all of their teachers felt like it was such a challenging and off-putting note for them to choose. So that's why I kind of had brought up the question in our previous conversation about, well, how does the lens in which, if most of the fragrances that we're experiencing are coming from France, how does their experience with certain notes influence what we get to experience overseas? Because, I mean, beeswax, that's the last thing that I would expect someone to call challenging. But then in perfumery school, they're saying their teachers are like, whoa, what are you doing, as if they were reaching for civet or something like that,
Yeah. It's kind of relative, right? Like, I think our environment and our culture can influence what or how we perceive certain notes. So that's really fascinating. I really need to look up that podcast. I think that's a really good question that you had brought up. And do you have any initial thoughts about that topic? I know I have my opinions on that, but
I think it kind of meshes with some of the other things we wanted to talk about, but I think it really comes down to diversifying the pool of people, who are making these fragrances for the major houses. Because if they're predominantly working with people out of these perfume schools, and, there's only a couple that are recognized, internationally, and it's a few in France, one New York. It's not really giving us a chance to diversify the pools and what we're smelling, especially since, we're talking about Eurocentrism in fragrances, but it's really, in terms of the perfumer, it's French dominant, not even, other people in Europe struggle getting their brands off the ground.
That's so true.
White Americans struggle getting their brands off the ground or telling their stories, to where I see something like Karen NYC and she's like, hey, I want to tell authentic New York stories. And I'm like, hell yeah, like, please do. So, I think when we say, at least for me, when I say Eurocentrism in fragrances and needing to diversify the lot, it's not just saying, oh, I want to see all black everything black owned. It's saying we really need to take a look at how dominant it is from a French lens, and let some other people get in there and start making some fragrances. I think that would kind of change what we're smelling. Because we get fragrances that are inspired by other places, instead of getting fragrances that, are done by perfumers from there other places. And it's like, oh, this is what I think the Moroccan air smells like. Or, I think y'all like mango. Yeah. Here's some mango. It's like, well, okay, that's cool. But
Yeah, those
Just
are
get some
really good
people.
points. Yeah, even if you look at a brand like Frederic Kamal, which is, often seen as like one of the gold standard type of niche houses. If you look at who Frederic Kamal ended up picking for the perfumers,
Mm.
yeah, most of them happen to be French. And it could be because that's where he's from. He has more access to those folks. But it does make me kind of scratch my head a little when, especially when they're creating these fragrances that are inspired by other places. uh it's getting to your point of, they could have gotten someone who's from there. So
Yeah, and train them and work with them, because
yeah.
these are situations where these houses, it's not like they're pumping out fragrances back to back to back. A lot of them, right? They're taking their time. So if you're going to take your time, you don't necessarily have to, even if you don't want to fully train somebody in making the fragrance, have someone by your side, have somebody who's working with you through that process, or a team of people working with you through that process.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, there's some comments in here I definitely want to highlight.
Please.
Yeah, so CB Tyler had mentioned it's so interesting to think about how each of us got into fragrance and what those first fragrances were. Interesting. CB Tyler brought up Samsara. That's a great fragrance, lovely sandalwood and jasmine fragrance. That is one example of a fragrance that is inspired by a different place, but was made by a French house.
Mm-hmm.
Carter, hi Carter, how are you doing? He said it's so wild too because France was super late to the game.
Right.
Caso Messi in the U.S. was legit founded before Marie Antoinette was born. Yeah, that's true. And also, if you think about where perfume was invented, like if you look at like the deep history of it, like from what I understand, it came from Mesopotamia, which is not near France.
Right.
And then I think about how Guerlain often touts, they often advertise Shalimar as being the first quote unquote Oriental fragrance. But what about all the other fragrances that were made in that region that it was based on? So
right.
It's interesting. And then, go ahead.
No, I think, I wonder, I should say, how much that applies to their audience at that point in time. Like, who are you saying that to? Because, like, if you're saying as a French house to the French, hey, well, we're carrying the first Oriental fragrance,
Yeah.
and you're speaking to them, I still don't love it, but I'm looking at it in a completely different context than if you're turning to the world and saying, well, hey, we're doing the first Oriental fragrance. It's really, it's like, spitting in their face, like.
Yeah. But
But
it
I'm sorry,
also,
go ahead.
no, yeah. I think also looking at it as like how Oriental is defined, it could be defined as like coming from a certain region, but you could also see it as like the Europeans' dream of what that region is like.
Right.
So I guess if you look at it that way, sure, maybe it could be the first one. I don't know.
Is that the proper use of the word?
Yeah, exactly. Um, and then Hannah here said, what about Neela Vermeer? Are you familiar with that brand,
I'm
Mario?
not. I'm not. Please educate me
Yeah.
if you are.
So, Hannah, feel free to share your thoughts about it. From what I understand, it is a house based in Paris. I believe the creator of the house um, is of Indian descent. I know she has gotten, or she's collaborated with Bertrand Duchefort to do the fragrances.
Right.
But that's what my understanding is of that house. I definitely want to hear your thoughts on that, though.
Yeah, I'm not familiar at all. I will have to look into it.
Yeah, I know I own one of their fragrances, Bombay Bling, which I do enjoy.
So she has Bertrand Duchefort helping with her fragrances?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Have we tried any perfumes from? Oh, yeah. That's a good question. I've only tried Ducita, but that is technically a Paris-based fragrance house, although the creator is from Thailand. But Taiwan and Malaysia are two countries I've not tried fragrances from. How about you, Mario?
I would have to say not knowingly. I feel like I've gone through so many samples that, some I stayed with, some I didn't stay with. So I possibly, but not knowingly. Not knowingly. I would definitely love some recommendations though. Like I said, I'm trying to diversify the pot. and diversify my pot that
Yeah.
I'm picking from. So
Same here. Same here. Yeah. So Wendy, if you have any suggestions for us to try out, feel free to share. And Wendy also has her own channel, and she does fantastic reviews too. So make sure
Cool.
to check her out. Yeah, I know Brandon's all about indie fragrances.
What up, Brandon?
How are you doing? Yeah, so I was correct. The whole line was made
the whole
with
line.
Bertrand
Okay.
Duchaufour. Yeah. Okay. Oh, we have Joel here. So actually, beyond perfumery, it's institutionalized education that is centralized primarily in the US, France, and Britain. Decentralizing being less centric can be a start. Yeah, so this, I think, goes beyond fragrances, right? So
Absolutely. And I mean, I think with that, in terms of the education, it being such a small aspect and it being so centralized, it doesn't really get out, when I'm breezing through, AP chemistry, nobody pulls me aside like, hey, you should
yeah,
consider perfumery school. That's not how it goes.
yeah, that's true.
For a lot of people, even who are interested in this hobby, it's not something that you would even think about or consider until you're probably past the age of going back to school, or wanting, being in a space to dedicate that time and that money,
Yeah. Bringing people here to teach her way doesn't really solve anything yet. So it seems like that would be more of a surface level solution.
I understand that.
Okay. How are you doing, Ben? Okay, Carter. Carter knows more about this than I do, so definitely read his comment. So yeah, sort of that's where the oldest documentation. Okay, there are some that predate that. Thank you for sharing that. Okay.
So how do you feel? Because I think that kind of touches on one of the topics we had noted down. How do you feel? Because, within French perfumery, it's typically, or even just our current westernized perfumery, those coming from Britain, those coming from here in America, generally, they're following a brief. They're then working with that team. They're spending X amount of weeks, months, going back and forth, trying to get the formulation together. But I mean, with the little bit that I do know that within other cultures, that's typically and historically not the approach towards creating a fragrance. So do you feel like that has anything to do with why we might view French perfumery or more westernized perfumery differently?
Yeah, possibly. Are you referring more to like the designer brands?
Yeah, the designer brands, and I mean the niche houses as well.
Some of them too. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah,
Because when
too.
I think of I think about growing up, and I think about like my aunt. She's like, "Hey, we're going to the Middle Eastern bookstore. We're about to go smell 50 fragrances, and they also can make you anything that you want on demand. Tell them what notes you like. They're going to mix it up for you. Put it in a vial. You're good to go, right?" I just look at that, and then I cross it with with what we look at, whether it be designer or niche perfumery, and just in terms of the creation. I wonder if it impacts us looking at one as more artistic or more valuable versus another school of perfumery.
It could be. It could be. Yeah, I can definitely see that. It also makes me wonder if, even though, yes, I know I like fragrances that kind of tell a story, and especially when they have like a really good copy of what the fragrance is all about. Oftentimes these houses, like, they go all out on creating the story. It's debatable on whether or not they succeed in executing that. But I do wonder if we look at some of these houses like Chanel, that sometimes they push, I consider them to be myths sometimes, like what type of stories they put on attached to their fragrances. That could be part of the reason why it appeals to a lot of people. Douglas here. So Douglas says French perfumery dominance goes hand in hand with French aromochemical dominance. I think that's a really good point.
I need to pick whether I'm reading the comments in the chat or on the screen.
Oh yeah.
Let's see.
I know it's hard to go back and forth.
Right. French aroma chemical dominance. In terms of quality, is that what you're saying, Douglas? Or in terms of quantity, or
Or I wonder if it's like the aroma chemicals that were either invented in France or like discovered in France.
just in terms of like the on the actual chemical side, in terms of creating the aroma chemicals, we're not talking about just like access to them.
Yeah, I'm curious to know. Let's see. Yeah, man, I'm so slow with the comments. Sorry, everyone. Go catch up. Okay.
I haven't
Oh,
tried anything from
so
Pran. I've heard they're great, but I don't
yeah,
want to say but because I haven't tried them. But in general, some of the, I guess, fragrance stories or fragrance profiles that I've heard, they seem to be pretty, along the same lines that I would get from a French perfumery house.
yeah.
What up, Patrick?
Prince one, I want to try. Yeah, I saw Patrick's comment about your AP Chem flex. No. Okay, yeah, it seems like people like Prin, so I definitely,
I would want to check it out. I would definitely
yeah.
want to check it out. What are some of the brands that, I mean, I know you love Versailles. Um, and I'm sorry, I know you love Decita, but what are some of the brands that you like outside of French perfumery? Because I
Yeah,
feel like you have experienced a lot more than I have.
there's definitely more that I need to discover. I really like PM fragrances, Pink Mahogany.
Hmm.
Um, that house is just really good. I own Tandem from Chevalier. She's the perfumer, and my husband has the travel spray of French Cuffs, and
Okay.
I would say both are pretty avant-garde because they're very unusual, but very wearable to me. So I like that balance. Um, what else? I also have one from Chris Collins. It's another Black-owned fragrance house, and
Hmm.
then I have a travel spray from Maya Angelou. But I definitely need to discover more outside of Europe. Although Maya Angelou is based in the UK, I believe.
Okay. Okay. I know she's based somewhere in Europe.
Yeah, I
Okay.
think she's, yeah.
I want to try some of her fragrances, you know?
All right, Carter said, it's impossible to separate French perfumery from their second colonial empire. Guerlain wouldn't be what they are without vanilla grown in Réunion and Madagascar. That's a good point. And I think um, I kind of hinted at this in my video that was kind of criticizing Guerlain that people didn't really like. But yeah, that's a good point, Carter. I think being very mindful of how these masterpieces, quote unquote masterpieces, came to be, like what resources were taken, where did they come from, what did these brands do did they do anything to kind of support the people that they were reaping the benefits from?
Right. No, that's a great point because I haven't thought about it in light of Madagascar or just that whole Bourbon Island region, but I've definitely thought about it in terms of how often, Haitian vetiver oil is pushed and pushed and pushed. And it's like, I guess someone, if you kind of have the knowledge there, it just always hits strange. It's like, I'm not trying to see a French brand pushing to me their Haitian vetiver oil.
Uh,
What is this is not, this doesn't sit right with my soul. And again, it's just kind of like, well, hey, there's so much more that you can be done if you want to start incorporating these raw materials or these fragrance profiles from across the country that make it real.
yeah. Brandon, if all of Chanel's stories are true, yeah, she probably would have been fun to party with. Um, there's a lot of legends that were kind of created to make her
Yeah,
look better.
I've stayed out of her chapters.
Yeah.
I've stayed away.
I'm trying to see what other points we were bringing up during our chat.
D'Angelo says that Rirana is a Malaysian house.
Oh, okay.
So I guess I have tried a Malaysian house because I've tried what is it, the Coco Nanas and Cherry on Top,
Oh,
and they're
really?
both good. Yeah,
Oh, okay. I need to check it out. Yeah, I have not tried any Malaysian brands.
both real fruity fragrances.
Nice. Tara said they actually own a lot of perfumery companies. Yeah, that's so true. Yeah. So they're kind of controlling all that.
Hmm. That's interesting because I mean, I wonder just kind of how that information crosses with a lot of the clone houses, you know, that are not based in France, you know, that are saying,
Yeah.
okay, well, we'll figure out how to do that, you know, and then if we can figure out,
Yeah.
you know, how you're creating this accord that you own, if we can figure out how to capture it ourselves, then we can now take that and go make our own things with it, you know.
Yeah. I think you brought up a good point when we were discussing the topics, and you had mentioned about like clones and ownership and artistry. Do you want to share more about what you had in mind for that?
Sure. Yeah. I just think it's I mean, you come from a musical background, right? You know, within different realms, we look at ownership differently, you know?
Yeah.
And I feel like within fragrance, depending on who you talk to, just the view of ownership of some of these formulas is just kind of, it doesn't sit really well with me, especially if we're going to talk about the history of perfumery and how different just applications of scent as art has been around forever, right? At that point, you wonder how many original ideas are there really, you know? So I'm not one
Yeah.
who really cares, you know, about clones or if something smells like something else. I just want to know. I want to know
Yeah.
before I smell it, you know, what is it going to smell like? But the idea that, you know, you're just ripping this brand off or you're ripping that brand off, it's hard for me to wrap my mind around that.
Yeah. I think my thoughts about this it might be a little bit nuanced. I don't have like a black and white opinion on it. When I think about music, that one, and this might be an opinion that a lot of people don't agree with, but a lot of music, it keeps borrowing from each other. And some examples of that, of either sampling or even at like Bach pieces or Debussy, like they have borrowed over and over again. And that's why I know there's this push for copywriting music, and I'm kind of struggling with that because it's kind of hard to quantify like can be copyrighted or not. So music, I definitely have my opinions on that, but to me, it's kind of hard to say if something's ripped off because a lot of times our songs are following patterns that have been done over and over again throughout history, and you know this, I'm sure.
Yeah,
For
I'm sure you
fragrances,
hum
I
along
think,
to songs that you're listening to for the first time.
yeah,
You know, you can hear what's coming, you know?
right, exactly. Yeah, the chord progressions, like oftentimes they've been used over and over again.
There's only so much you can do, you know?
Yeah. Where I would kind of have concern when there is like a blatant some or maybe a composer or a creator, and you create a position of work and you're kind of ripping that idea off and then profiting off of it. That to me is kind of like a dick move. I'm not a fan of that, especially when it comes to like stealing intellectual property. Yeah, again, I feel like with music it is kind of hard. With smells too, that could be kind of hard too when you're trying to see if if it's actually following a trend or if it is actually bring off of a fragrance. That can be hard. But I think when it comes to like the artistic idea of something, that's where I don't know. I don't know if I'm making any sense, but
Yeah, I think I can make sense of what you're saying. I mean, there's a fine line, right? Yeah, it's like growing up and going to the Family Dollar, and it's like CEO for men, our impression of boss for men, and it's the same bottle, the same box, the same font. It's $3. It smells like crap. You know, yeah, or even actual just clone houses. I understand why some people have problems with that. I understand why some people have no problem with that. And I can hear most rationale on both sides, on both sides of it.
yeah. The thing about clone houses, at least with most of the time, they actually state what they're inspired by.
Mhm.
So maybe that's why I don't have much of a problem with that. I think I have more of a problem when there's like a luxury brand that is selling something that smells blatantly like something else, and they're charging so much more for it, and they're not crediting where they got it from.
Now, see, that's interesting because I feel like within the larger fragrance community, be it on YouTube, Instagram, those are actually the people who get more of the pass. And it's like, oh, this is an amazing fragrance. It smells a little like an Aventus, but it's great, such high quality ingredients.
It's better.
Right, but yeah, it's I think it's better. And then to be Armaf, how dare you?
I know.
And it's like, well, I mean, how dare they? 100 mils for $29. That's great.
Yeah.
How dare they? How did they? How did they? Is what I want to know. But yeah, I think it can be really nuanced, really depending on how you're approaching it. I do agree with you, though. I mean, I think it's the other thing that I think is interesting. I don't think perfumers, most of them, I'm sure, especially if you're a small independent perfumer, you might care a little bit more. But I feel like in the interviews that I've seen from perfumers and any content that I've seen, they usually are very open and talking about, well, yeah, I was influenced by smells things I smelled growing up, or hey, I made Mugler cologne. I smelled this soap in Morocco. I was like, hey, I want to capture that in the fragrance. We don't necessarily look at that as cloning or duping or anything like that. But if somebody was to go make something inspired by Mugler cologne, then it's like, what are you doing? But you're going to be inspired by something if you're out there creating. If you're creating anything,
and that's really part of art, right?
It doesn't come out of thin
process.
air.
Exactly. Yeah. So Ben said the whole colonial thing has shaped everything for centuries, though. The perception of exotic spices and aromatics as luxury or exotic. Yeah, that's a good point. It is interesting to see what is kind of advertised as being exotic, and how that is oftentimes advertised as being more luxurious. And oftentimes it's coming from the European brands that are, using these spices, and it's really their perception of what exotism looks like.
Yeah, I mean, exoticism is a European idea,
It's relative.
I don't I couldn't tell you what my mom finds to be exotic or what I find to be exotic, or it's not a term that it's a term I hear now used used a little differently, but I mean, I feel like, because I understand what you're saying. I'm definitely not trying to diminish what you're saying in terms of how exotic spices, exotic fragrances have been looked at as luxury. I'm just saying that point of view is not something that I can relate to, or I know many people that can relate to, because the things that are being viewed as exotic are things that they grew up with and are very commonplace, and not viewed as luxury, because they can go get their nutmeg for cheap, or whatever it may be.
That's reminded me. This was years ago. I was watching this show on TV. I forgot what it's called, but it's the one where this guy goes to different countries. It's not Anthony Bourdain. It's this And he tastes different
The
dishes.
the bald headed
Look
guy.
for the yeah
He
guy.
eats all the weird shit.
So yeah. Well, supposedly, but he went to the Philippines, to where my dad's from,
Okay.
and he um, basically ate like a bread and then had ice cream sandwiched in it, and it's like that's like the most we could eat, and he's like showing it off like it was this exotic food. I just thought it was hilarious.
Bread and ice cream.
It's like I grew up eating that. Okay.
Right.
Um, but oh, Hannah brought up a good point. It's only luxurious if the French give it to you. It's not luxurious when it's in the. That's so true. How many times I know? Maybe Hannah, you could relate, but like when I would bring food to school, that was quote unquote ethnic. I mean, people would be like, "Ew, why are you bringing that? It smells terrible." But then when we smell it in a fragrance, suddenly it's luxurious and exotic.
Yeah, it's got lavender in it now.
It is enough to say colonialism is shaped as if it's in the past. It's still ongoing. Yeah.
Yeah. Very much so.
Ended for sure. Exactly. Okay. Yeah, I'm glad I'm the only one who experienced that.
Are we both coming through clearly?
Yeah, I saw that Brandon said I was digitizing. Am I still digitizing?
Well, see, when you're digitizing or somebody's digitizing on my phone, I don't know if it's them or me, so that's why I wanted to ask.
Yeah.
It was breaking
You're
up a little
clear to
bit.
me. Okay. Yeah, I'm looking at the video. Mine is a little bit blurry or pixelated, so hopefully it will clear up soon.
Okay.
Okay.
Gotcha.
I know something else. Oh, actually, quick time check. Are you cool with talking for about 20 more minutes?
I'm on your time. Yeah, I'm on
Okay,
your time. However you want to do it.
cool. All right, so it's only mine. So it seems like yours is clear. It's just mine.
Okay.
Yeah, it's probably because I have Comcast, and we know how Comcast is.
Yes.
I'm from the Matrix. I apologize, everyone.
It's all good.
So one thing you brought up was how fragrance ads don't always seem to connect with certain consumers. You want to say more about that?
Well, I mean, we kind of touched on it, right? Because I was talking about how getting back into fragrances, I was like, well, they definitely didn't try to catch me. You know what I mean? They definitely didn't try. Um, I don't understand fragrance advertisements, and I don't know that that necessarily has to do with it being Eurocentric, you know, the industry. I think they're just known for being weird in general and not necessarily to the point, not really selling you the fragrance. It's usually more like a fashion ad with just, you know, a fragrance bottle in the background.
Yeah.
But even within it, when I do see people of color being used in advertisements and in marketing, it feels a lot like placeholding.
Mm-hmm.
Lucas Sabat was recently used for the Ralph Lauren's Ralph's Club, their new fragrance, right? I smelled Ralph's Club. It is pretty much a barbershop fragrance, you know. Lucas Sabat has freeform dreadlocks down to the bottom of his back, right? Not saying that you need to, you know, have a fresh, clean haircut if you're going to be advertising a barbershop fragrance. But I'm just saying it just kind of feels like they're picking random people and just putting them there. And not just when it
Oh,
comes to people of color. I mean, I don't think Johnny Depp fits Savage. I don't think. What were they using Lenny Kravitz to advertise?
oh, yeah. What was that fragrance? Yeah, I know what you're talking about, though.
It's the last thing he smells like. I guarantee you. Like, I guarantee you. You know. So it just seems like a lot of placeholding.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and like I said, not just when it comes to pulling in people of color, it can be anybody. You know, I don't know what Lady Gaga had to do with Voce Viva. I don't know what Willow Smith has to do with, you know, her fragrance. But I feel like in terms of, a business approaching their consumers, that they would typically want to bring as many people in as they can. So I just feel like they're missing the mark, not just when it comes to their non-European consumers.
Yeah, I think you bring up a really good point. I definitely see that, and it could be just them tapping into their fan base, and obviously that's going to get them more money.
Oh, yeah.
I do question whether that would be sustainable in the long run, because if people find out, oh, it smells like that is not what I expected it to be based on the model who was picked. People get disappointed, and I would actually argue that I'm seeing this sometimes with who brands choose to give certain free bottles to. Like when we look at influencers. So I don't have an issue with the free bottles, like getting that. It's more of like when brands target certain influencers and they're not really thinking not that fan base, the subscribership that person has would be a good fit. So that's something I have noticed.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's I haven't really picked up on it that much, I don't I actually haven't been watching as much YouTube these past few months, to be honest. I've been watching far less, especially when it comes to the larger channels. So in terms of who's getting what, I don't really know. But something that you said just kind of made me think about the opportunity that's out there, because you're saying, well, hey, are they getting that product in front of the right person, for their brand or for their product? It just feels like with fragrances being luxury and they kind of having this marketing formula where, hey, our marketing has nothing to do with the fragrance. We're pretty much just letting you know it's out and to come get it. If they're tailing to luxury consumers who know that they don't necessarily even have to advertise to them, if that has to do with the lack of effort, and putting in a little bit more effort would probably allow them to really open up, their consumer base, and tap into more of those middle class and working class markets if they just put forth some effort.
Yeah, it'd be nice to do that effort. It'd be lovely.
Yeah, I think for a while we were like, yo, don't advertise at me. Don't advertise at me. I can tell you're trying to advertise at me with your hip hop McDonald's commercial. But then after a while, it's like, yo, will you please, like, could you not treat me like I'm invisible at the same time?
Yeah. Sorry, I had to highlight this because it made me chuckle. Comcast would be more popular if it was renamed, if it renamed itself Comcast. It's funny.
Yeah, look, they've got a chokehold on the game no matter what. I'm glad they're not available in my neighborhood.
Oh, yeah. And when Angelina Jolie was brought on to Girl On, I remember people did not like that because they felt like it just wasn't a good fit for the brand's image.
I can't imagine that it was.
Yeah, for sure. Eurocentric. Okay, yeah, this is a good point. I think we kind of talked about this when we were chatting with each other, how representation might be found more on a superficial level, so hiring models of color. But when you look at who's part of the board members or who creates the perfumes, it's oftentimes not representative of even the customer base. So
right. And I think that's really why there's a opportunity for the brands, because the customer base, and I hate pulling a stat when I can't reference where I got the stat from, but I'm gonna pull it anyway. So
go for it.
The stat was that in the US, 20% of fragrances are bought by African Americans. Designer fragrances, with fragrances that are available, not just designers, but that are available within your department stores, right? We make up 12% of the population, right? So we're clearly buying more than what we're represented. And they're not even trying to say, oh, let's tap into that. Oh, y'all are buying fragrances? Let's go. Let's make some more money. It's just kind of like, no, we're just gonna keep doing things, how we do it every day.
Yeah. So Douglas said, for the most part, in fragrance ads, regardless of who, what is depicted, the fantasies are white and male. The fantasies are from a Euro-Western perspective, and they're heteronormative.
Oh,
Yep, that's
extremely.
so true, for sure. Yeah, and again, it's ignoring a lot of the people who are wanting or interested in buying these fragrances.
I'm sorry, I got caught by something Tara was saying. So this is the issue I have with them. Mikolev, after their insensitive post, they reached out to me and offered me free bottles. So
Oh, did you know about this?
no, so what did they do?
Okay. I'm gonna see how I could state this carefully. Allegedly, no, actually,
Allegedly.
I saw it happen. They had posted this post on Instagram, and it was a model, and it was for one of their fragrances, and she was in blackface, like black paint on her face, and they were called out for it. Uh, yeah, I
So look, some
yeah,
things are
it
so
was bad.
so across the line. It's just kind of like I wish it was something else just because it would have been more creative. Like you're supposed to learn from other people's mistakes.
Oh,
You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like so it's just like,
yeah.
are you seeing blackface?
It got worse. So yeah. So I did message them. A few other people have also reached out to them and said, "What the hell? Like, what are you doing?" And when I got the reply, I was under the impression that they were like, "Oh, sorry, like we messed up. Well, we apologize. We didn't realize." But which okay, but I think it was the next day after they'd taken it down, they re-uploaded it. And not only did they re-upload it, they put a caption that said, um, art is beautiful, something about art. Like, yeah. So I don't know.
Okay.
It was probably not the same person that had messaged me. I don't know. Or if it was, that was terrible. But clearly they did not learn from their lesson at that point. But yeah, Tara's saying that they tried to send her bottles, and she had asked them, "What are you doing to fix that problem?" Yeah,
Yeah, that's ridiculous. Yeah, they figured they could send bottles to Big Tara because Tara Tara's cool with everybody. She'll smooth it over. Nah, it don't work like that.
like what
Oh
were you guys
man.
thinking? Like that was one of the ones that was blatantly wrong. Like it was so clear. And the thing a lot of people forgot is that they actually had an ad years ago where they did the same thing, except it was like a movie ad. It wasn't a photo. Um, but yeah, people forgot
This
about that.
the same people, the same
Yeah,
brand.
same brand. Yeah, but I don't think people made a fuss about it back then. Um, but anyways,
See, I mean, I think that's the thing with you've got these niche brands, right? Be them small European brands, small American brands, whatever. And I don't know these people. I don't know these people. When
yeah,
it, when you focus on a luxury product and you focus on a luxury consumer base, you may have been able to get away with things for years with no one saying anything, and then out of nowhere, here come these kids on YouTube. During the pandemic, people are ordering samples of your fragrance, and then they find out like you're re-uploading pictures of blackface onto your Instagram, and they're gonna come for you. Absolutely, they're gonna come for you. I
yeah,
feel like they have to have been operating within comfort, and not just them, but for quite some time, because that's kind of wild. A lot of these bigger designer brands get in trouble, but they don't really get in trouble for the same thing like over and over again. You know what I mean? Like they'll
yeah.
get in trouble one at a time. Like, oh, I'm sorry, we didn't know.
My bad.
My
Yeah,
bad. But it's a business. You've got lots of different interests at stake, so they're going to go out and try to, if not correct the problem, at least make sure it doesn't happen again. Um,
hmm
but
hmm
with a small company, yeah, I mean, they will make it very clear, what their intentions are.
yeah, for sure.
That is wild. I see people mentoring Fragrance Du Bois, right? I remember that situation as well.
Oh, yeah. Oh, and then the whole melanin debacle last year.
I,
Oh, maybe was that before you got into fragrance like that?
it could have been, and also, I mean, I'm sure there's things I miss as well.
Yeah.
Oh,
I mean, the
I'm
bottom
almost
line
afraid to
is,
ask, but I'm curious.
yeah, no, okay, just like I guess the Cliff Notes version of it. What brand was it? I forget. But it was a white-owned brand, and they wanted to basically capitalize off of the whole movement of BLM.
Oh,
And
okay.
well, I don't want to say. Okay,
Well, I'm
that
reading
was
the
my
comment
opinion of it.
now. I'm reading the
Yeah,
comment now. So there was a fragrance named Melanin.
correct. And they had black models and everything, and there was no indication of at first like who they were they like going to donate to like a black organization or anything, like, or were they just profiting off of this whole idea? Equality Fragrance was actually the one that was like really spearheading this, like questioning them, like, why are you putting out this product? They
Right.
ended up not releasing that fragrance anymore, but he had to make a big fuss out of it for them to stop it. So a lot of it is cringy.
I think that's the beauty of you've got this community of people on YouTube and Instagram, and I'm sure Facebook. I don't know because I'm not on there. But these people who are trying to, normalize fragrance usage, and normalize the hobby. And I guess that's the beauty of it, because these are the type of things that, yeah, I mean, had I been, informed at that point in time, I would have been right there with them. You know what I mean? Shaking the table, flipping the table, whatever, needs to be done. I didn't hear about the Mikolev situation until today. They're not a brand that I was supporting anyway. Not that I was not supporting them, but yeah, I don't have any of their fragrances. I've never smelled any. But yeah, I hope that, I guess, in a conversation towards solutions, that we can continue to just pull people in, because the more eyes are on these situations, then the more we can kind of self-regulate.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And in terms of, I guess, what we can do, I know for me, I continue to choose to promote brands that I actually do like, that I honestly really like the brands, and push for the brands that are coming from, people who aren't always represented. So that's one piece that I have control over, and to hopefully discover more houses that aren't necessarily, Eurocentric.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really, of course, yeah. That, I think that's something we all can do, right? It's something we all can control and lean into. And I would also really like to see, with this saturation of more niche and indie brands exploding over the past couple of years, really kind of leading into maybe some consulting,
Yeah.
maybe just being more intentional with what they're doing,
Mm-hmm.
and looking at how we make this a less Eurocentric space, a less French centric space,
Yeah.
because,
And
it's kind of like the first thing like when I say I cringe when I see a black owned brand with a French name, like if they're not in Haiti or a French speaking country, I'm just like, why are we, it's not like, why are we doing this? Like I'm frustrated with the creator. It's more so like, bro, like, yo, no, you
yeah.
got to get, you, we want
Yeah. Yeah, it's like,
and
why they had to do that. They kind of have to play that game, right?
right. Or even if they didn't feel like they might have felt like that was their dream. Oh, I want to have this. It's going to be
Mm-hmm.
called this, and I'm like, I get that. Why was that your dream? Well, that's
Yeah.
because with all the big, yeah, exactly. So you don't have to do that. You can do you, because we need you.
Yeah.
But I know that that's a sore spot for me in particular.
Yeah, for sure. Um, And I guess one other point to bring up, and because I'm mentioning this because someone had brought up the brand Floraiku, who I'm not that interested in trying out. Well, actually, I did smell some of their fragrances. I think they're okay. I would say look at who is creating a certain house, especially if it's a house that seems to be inspired by a place. Like thinking about Floraiku, it seems like they're very influenced by Japanese and Asian cultures. But look to see who is creating that brand. Because oftentimes what I am seeing, and it's not just in fragrances, but if a creator is making something that is more of an inspiration of an experience that wasn't experienced firsthand, it's often lackluster compared to like examples I can think of if it's coming from a creator who's experienced something. So yeah, just something to keep in mind. And not saying you shouldn't buy from European brands. I'm going to continue to buy from European brands for sure, but be more mindful of that.
Yeah, I mean, and you're much nicer than I am because I think I saw you talk about the brand before, and I was like, oh wow, that's wild. I didn't know.
Yeah.
I didn't really know that was their setup. Um, and I buy from European designers, and I don't think
Yeah.
twice about it. And that's not to say that I won't. I think that kind of goes into the consumer because I mean, you know, there's nothing wrong in wanting nice things. And if you feel like this fragrance from Prada is a nice thing, then buy this fragrance from Prada, do your thing.
If you like it,
you deserve
exactly.
nice things. So I think there's the things that we can control, and then also, kind of leaning back onto the industry as well, so that the full onus isn't on us as consumers.
Yep. Great points. All right, any other points you wanted to bring up?
Do you think reviewers play a role in this at all? I mean, I know you kind of mentioned who gets free bottles, who doesn't get free bottles. And I mean, I know within the industry and within YouTube in general, this is a very small niche, but what are your thoughts on
that? Reviewers and influencers, I'm assuming.
Right.
In a way, yeah, I think they can play a role. It could impact, I guess, this continuous push for Eurocentric ideas. It's not true for all reviewers and influencers, but what I will say is I wish that more influencers would look at the brands that they are talking about. I know a lot of the ones that I watch try to be selective with what they want to review and give positive reviews to, especially. But I think that's a space where reviewers do have some control over, where, if they have certain, oh, where's Mario? He left. I'm not sure where he went. But I guess the point I was making is, if an influencer knows that a certain brand isn't in line with their values, or if the reviewer wants to promote more brands that are not necessarily Eurocentric, that is something that they can try to push for. Oh, his app crashed. Oh no. Okay. Okay, I'll stay on a few minutes. Maybe if you can come back, that'd be great. If not, no worries. I don't want to pressure you. I do want to read some of these comments here. So Christoph Lodmiel, how are you doing? He said, I know one brand that does that to stick it to the public who expects French to do better, but they are very USA. If done well, I think it's cool. Oh, you're oh, I need to let you in. Okay, he's in here. My bad. There you go. Okay.
Hey, sorry about that.
No, don't apologize. You're good. Can someone educate me on how Floraiku is actually misrepresenting? I know nothing of the brand. Okay, so Patrick, to answer your question, the whole premise of that brand is that I guess the creator made haikus, and made fragrances based on his haikus or their haikus. Um, if you don't read the About Me page, it's kind of assumed that they are taking a lot from Japanese culture. Like if you look at the packaging, a lot of I guess the names are kind of inspired by that. But yeah, they do take from the Japanese aesthetics, and it's owned by people who are not Japanese. And it's one thing to be inspired by something, and we're kind of discussing this with music. I don't have an issue necessarily with like borrowing ideas. It's more of, for them, it just seemed like, if you look at the brand, they were trying to make themselves kind of look Japanese in a way.
It's just corny, to me, and I don't think there's, I guess, to make a analogy to music, it's kind of like with ska music. Like, ska's cool to a lot of people. To Jamaicans, it's corny, So I'm like, I think that's what happens when you're borrowing from a culture that's not of your own. It can be cool to many people, but oftentimes from that culture that you're actually borrowing from, it's corny.
Yeah. Oftentimes we get like the touristy version of a culture or a genre, right?
Yeah.
And that's how I feel about Fuloraiku, I think. It seems very touristy to me.
Yeah, I mean, I get the same vibe. I mean, it's all I kind of had to find out was like, oh, they're not Japanese. I was like, oh, what is this? Okay, all right, that's enough. That's all I need to hear. Yeah, I just don't like that approach. I prefer people to be authentic in what they're doing.
Oh, yeah, there's a reluctance to buy products that are not in English and French. Yeah, that's actually a good point. And this goes outside of perfumery. Yeah.
It's an interesting point.
Oops. Okay. So Tara said, yeah, I think reviews can do some good if they make a point to promote some of the indie brands, non-European indie brands. But I know a lot of bigger ones don't like to do that. That's true. That's the sad thing. Those videos don't get as much views. So I think that's why people are less likely to do that. But
yeah, I mean, YouTube is a business for many people. So.
Oh, that's hilarious. I didn't even read any of the poems. I didn't realize that some of them were not haikus. Okay. Yeah, I think for that brand, I'm more kind of annoyed by it. It's like,
yeah,
clearly it's watered down, and I don't know.
It just seems kind of silly. And, I think if they had, a couple other houses inspired by other cultures and you could see them side by side, it might be a little easier to see how silly it is. But yeah, it's just silly.
Mm-hmm. I think to ask influencers shift from reviewing scents to instead also reviewing brands underlying political ideology is, yeah, okay. So the point he's trying to make is some folks don't want to get into the political side of things. But it's like, my opinion is everything's political in a way.
Right.
But also, like, when I review fragrances, I'm not looking to get more views. Like, I just do this thing for fun. So I'm less invested in trying to get more viewership.
Yeah. And I guess I don't feel like it has to be that political, or, I mean, maybe not non-political, but it's not heavy. We're talking fragrances, right? So,
Yeah.
it's, I hesitate being gentle or, kind of stepping softly around certain topics, because I mean, these are people who are making fragrances. This isn't the end of the world. This isn't these huge products. If we don't like what they're doing, I think we've got, every space to say, okay, that I can't ride with that, or I'm silly with that, or to push heavily against that. Yeah.
Yeah, and Josh brings up a good point. Perfumery is political. If you consider the suppliers and farmers, they are often brown, but they really are on the board of directors. Yeah,
Right.
it goes back to representation and yeah, who's in charge.
That's where we should be talking the politics, you know, not necessarily in
Mm-hmm.
the is this brand ripping off that brand or, you know.
If we want to see perfume as art, we need to legit review it as art, and that means holding the ideological aspects up to scrutiny too. Okay. Yeah, I could see how hard it is to separate that, especially knowing where things come from. And I think for a long time, that's how I felt about clothing too, like being mindful of like who makes my clothes. Yeah, that is a political issue there.
It is. I mean, and the thing with clothing, I think I might have accidentally spoke over you. I think you were breaking up
Oh
a little
no,
bit.
okay.
But yeah, I mean, it's especially when it comes to clothing, it's can you afford to be mindful of where your clothes are coming from, you know, in a lot of those situations, you know, which I think makes a lot of the problems um, sometimes more difficult to attack, you know.
Hmm. People are saying that it's bedtime, but comment section's too long. Oh yeah, that's true. I know it's just it's getting more meaty now in our conversation. Okay, how about 10 more minutes? Is that good?
I mean, it's up to you. It's up to you. We
Yeah,
can
let's do
end it
10 more
if you need
minutes.
to. All right.
Okay, Ben says indie houses can make an effort to buy fair trade and or sustainable ingredients, use local handmade ingredients. The big ones won't do it, but the indie folks can and do. Yeah, but it just make me wonder though, why like it's frustrating when I know that these bigger brands who have resources choose not to do that. Um,
You said
that
when they have
does
the resources, they choose what now?
like they have the resources to buy fair trade and sustainable ingredients, but sometimes they choose not to. They go oftentimes with the cheapest option, and then they spend a lot on marketing on these ads with Adam Driver and a bunch of other celebrities.
Right. Yeah. I guess a part of me just feels like I would rather, like, if it's not going to be, you know, a real fair trade type of situation, then just use the synthetic version of it or whatever grows in your own country, you know, because,
Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, I mean, these aren't the things that are on our mind when we're looking at Madagascar vanilla listed on as a fragrance note on
Yeah.
Fragrantica or on Perfumo. We're not thinking about the famine in Madagascar, you know. But then when those things come top of mind, it's like, hey, look, I'll take some vanilla, and that's fine with
Yeah.
me.
Yeah. Rudy does bring up a true point. Big brands are all about profit. Yeah, they oftentimes don't care.
Yeah,
And I do love a lot of the fragrances that come from these big brands, but part of the reason why I am choosing a lot more indie brands is because I can find some really good fragrances that I'm thinking they don't do harm, hopefully, and they are sourcing more sustainably. Well, not all indie brands do that. I think people often assume all the time indie brands are more responsible, but that's not always true.
right. They have the option, but you know, you really have to do your own research and look into what the brand's doing if that's important to you.
Oh yeah, that's a good point, Brandon.
Fair trade is scarce. Hmm.
Oh, Christoph, I did not see that. Companies that are not ethical, not respectful, have to be called out. we need a little bit of Orientalism. I think we had enough of Orientalism, kind of over it. We don't need any more of that.
I just don't understand the pushback, you know?
Yeah. Oh yeah, Yosh, do you talk about these topics on YouTube? You can look for ingredients that are on the red list. Okay, thanks for sharing that. That's good to know.
Check out COSP. Okay. I'm actually gonna take a note.
Yeah, and Yosh, she's coordinated the Scent Festival. That's actually an account that there.
Eve, can you repeat that? I know you were breaking up for me. I don't know if you were breaking up for everybody else.
Oh, sorry. Scent Festival is her account on Instagram.
Gotcha. Festival. Cool. All right, Yosh, I'm gonna come find you when we get off the live.
Right. Yeah, that's true. A lot of brands are kind of hard to sample, and it comes back to that issue of access too. They're just not as accessible. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that side of things really, you know, I think there's a lot of room for growth there because, I mean, you see these niche brands or these indie brands, they try to do their small runs and their small runs are selling out fast because, you know, people like you who are boosting them up on Instagram and on YouTube and their name gets out there and they sell out, you know. So it's clear that they are doing pretty well, you know, in terms of at least just supply and demand. So I feel like there's opportunity there for, I don't know, some of these decanting companies to start reaching out a little bit more to the indie companies, start stocking some decants.
Yeah.
These companies are doing well enough to where they should be able to afford to, you know, split a couple bottles for samples and get some samples up on the website. So I think that some of that comes back to the brands too, you know?
Yeah. Okay. Just looking at our to make sure we hit everything. Yeah. Any other points you want to bring up, Mario?
Oh no, I think we got them all.
Yeah. Yosh brought up some really good retailers that I do like. They're indie retailers, so make sure to check them out.
American Perfumer, Perfumery, Tiger Lily. Yeah. Scent Truck works with a lot of indie perfumers as well.
That's true. Yeah. Great. All right. So I think I'm going to put here. Thank you so much for joining. And I apologize for my matrixy digitized video. So thank you for bearing with it. And I'll see you all next time. Thank you so much, Mario, for joining this live.
No, thank you for having me. It was a whole lot of fun. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, and make sure to check out Mario's channel. I linked it in the description box so you could subscribe and check it out. He has really good reviews. So yeah, feel free to check out his videos. And thanks everyone for joining. I loved hearing everyone's thoughts. Yeah. So you all have a good night.
Have a good
night. Good day wherever you are. Okay, bye.